All right, does everybody hear me? All right, good afternoon. My name is Malcolm Frost, again, Commanding General for Center of Initial Military Training, also responsible for supporting Effort 11 of the United States Army Campaign Plan, Holistic Health and Fitness. If we can go to the next slide, please. And I'd like to welcome Chip East, who's the research physiologist for the Center for Initial Military Training. Before we get into the Army Combat Fitness Test, what I wanted to do is talk you through holistic health and fitness for the United States Army and what that means. Because the Army Combat Fitness Test, quite frankly, is just one small piece. It's an accelerant, but it is one piece of a much, much broader picture, which is holistic health and fitness and the system that we have in the United States Army. So I think the strategic environment is important to understand. So it's been 38 years since we've had a change in the physical fitness test, but we've learned a lot in the last 38 years on sports, physiology, the human body. You can see there we've had the number of Americans that cannot join the United States Army, only 29%. A lot of that is due to physical challenges, not being physically fit to come to the United States Army. The environment has been such that we have had up to 18% non-deployables, the majority of those in the recent couple of years for musculoskeletal injuries and for medical issues, quite frankly due to lack of holistic fitness, some of it physical, some of it psychological, and some of it other reasons. So what we did is we executed a bunch of studies. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about these, but a high physical demand study, which looked at the occupations of the United States Army, the 140, 145 military occupational skills, and looked at what it takes, the high physical demands, and the components of physical fitness necessary to do those acts or those tasks or those skills. And then we did the baseline soldier physical requirements readiness study. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but you can see the result was the occupational physical assessment test, the physical test to get into the United States Army. You know, 2 years ago, the test to get in the United States Army, the physical test, was the strength that it took to open the door to the recruiting center. That was it. There was no physical test. We had medical tests, we had mental tests, but we did not have a physical test. And then we looked at what are other nations and what are other individuals and what are other organizations doing in the realm of physical fitness. We looked at SOCOM, Special Operations Command, the Thor 3 initiative, the Ranger Athlete Warrior program. We looked at other nations, and we had other programs in the United States military. We had the Performance Triad run by the Surgeon General's office. We had Comprehensive Soldier Fitness 2, and we combined all of that and then put it under one umbrella of the holistic health and fitness system. Next slide, please. And so what we did is I think with H2F, the system of H2F, is we're trying to institutionalize this in the fabric of how the Army runs. And what does that mean? That means it's more than just the 2 years that a commander is in command and what they think is right for fitness for that unit or what facilities they think they need to build. All of them are well intended, but as a commander and as a former junior commander, I always thought I knew what was best for fitness. Well, guess what? I don't. And our commanders don't. And every 2 years, our units go through these cycles of PT programs and facility builds that do not have the staying power because they were not institutionalized through how the Army runs systems. The Program Objective Memorandum or the Army Campaign Plan or the Total Army Analysis and structure in our organizations through how the Army runs processes where we institutionalize holistic health and fitness in the fabric of our organizations so that it cannot leave or be changed or be a boutique program commander by commander. And I think that's really, really important. And so we built this pillar across these platforms of governance, the programs, equipment and facilities, personnel, and leader education. I'm going to talk you very briefly through each of these, and then we're going to dive into the Army Combat Fitness Test itself. Next slide. All right, governance. Bottom line is you have to have a document that has doctrine that tells you how to govern and execute holistic health and fitness. In the spring, we are staffing the new holistic health and fitness ADP and FM 7-22 for physical readiness training to get after how do we support, collect best practices, and then look at the enterprise data collection, and then give strategic leadership is going to really look at this is how units, this is the doctrine, the foundation for how you need to execute fitness in your organization. Slide. And then we got to have the program. The program is more than physical, so we need to integrate the non-physical. Whether that's sleep, nutrition, performance enhancement, recovery, behavioral and cognitive, all of those are wrapped up into the H2F system as well, taking the best of the breeds of the Comprehensive Soldier Fitness Program, Performance Triad, and pulling them all under the umbrella of holistic health and fitness. Slide. All right, equipment, facilities, and personnel. What is the most important weapon system in the United States Army? It's the soldier. Okay, well, here's the deal. From the M4 rifle to the M1 tank, what do we apportion, what do we give, and how do we support that equipment? Parts, supplies, training areas, training ranges, military occupational skills and professionals that do nothing but upkeep them, maintenance bays, maintenance facilities. What do we have for the most important weapon system in the United States Army? I would argue we have a lot. We have a lot to protect them on the battlefield, and we arm them. But generally, to train them and keep them up, what do we have? We have two things. We have centralized medical treatment facilities that look at you and take care of you after you are already broken. And we have what? We have outdated morale, welfare, and recreation gymnasiums that can be used by civilians, retirees, or anybody who can get into those facilities. What we do not have is world-class soldier-athlete facilities with professionals that can train them on all aspects of fitness, sleep, nutrition, electronically monitor them, registered dietitians, physical therapists, occupational therapists, strengths and conditioning coaches, and a soldier readiness performance center that is a training area or training range for the human and soldier body and mind. And that's where we're moving out with the holistic health and fitness system. And that is the concept we're moving towards in the POM process and in the TAA process, the Program Objective Memorandum, and the Total Army Analysis Structure process. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit here in a minute. Slide, please. So this is the concept. And right now we're going through the design phase for soldier readiness performance centers at the battalion or brigade level with the Corps of Engineers. There will be a standardized facility that installations can look at and modify their facilities or build in MILCON dollars in the out years. And we're looking at a decade down the road, but we've got to start somewhere with the right design, with a right soldier readiness performance center that has these aspects. Next slide. And also has a workout, agility training area. You can see accessory, resistance, recovery, cognitive training area, and it is outfitted and manned and staffed by those professionals you saw on that first page. In fact, we are piloting this in FY19 with Forces Command. And Forces Command is executing a holistic health and fitness light pilot, and they are starting it right now with 30 battalions. We don't have the facilities built, but they've modified some of their facilities. They've purchased some of their equipment that's necessary. But more importantly, they have staffed registered dietitians, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and strength and conditioning coaches in those 30 battalions. In fact, the Chief of Staff of the Army and the Secretary of the Army are in full support of every maneuver battalion in the United States Army having those skills resident in the maneuver battalions of our Army. We're working through that in the Total Army Analysis Program, and then looking at what's necessary at the brigade level and also in the institutional Army in the training base. Again, getting those professionals who understand fitness and can advise those commanders to make the right decisions on programs that are necessary at the individual level and for their unit level, and in support of holistic fitness for all soldiers. Slide. Now, once we do this, what else do you have to have? You cannot just throw it at the Army. You have to develop the leader education program all the way through the life of a career of a soldier or a leader, from privates in basic, warrant officers, second lieutenant, all the way through the basic courses, the captain's career courses, the BLC, ALC, SLCs of the world, the leader courses for our non-commissioned officers, all the way to general officers at the policy level and command sergeants majors in the War College on what is necessary at like the skill level 1 to the skill level 5 or the policy level. And we have to educate the force on holistic health and fitness, and we're going to take this and work with the Combined Arms Center, CAC, and get this into the centers of excellence and into the schoolhouses over the next couple of years. Slide. So that takes care of the 5 pillars. Now we're going to hone into what everyone probably came here for, which is the Army Combat Fitness Test. Again, periodized training and testing. It is one little piece of H2F, but it drives cultural change, obviously, as you heard from the Secretary of the Army this morning. What I want you to take away from the ACFT, what are the 3 most important reasons we are doing the Army Combat Fitness Test? Okay, number 1, combat readiness. It is about combat readiness, readiness for combat, and I'm going to prove to you why this test makes soldiers more ready for combat. Number 2, It is going to decrease musculoskeletal injuries and medical issues because it is about training the 10 of the 11 components of physical fitness, the 11th being body mass index. That is tested separately, but it trains on those 10 aspects of fitness. Because right now, what do we do as an Army? We train towards the test, and the test is the Army Physical Fitness Test. The ACFT tests you on cardiovascular endurance and muscular endurance. It does not test you on the other components of fitness: muscular strength, explosive power, speed, agility, flexibility, balance, reaction time. This test does. In the Army, we all like to train our beach bodies. We all, what we deny and what we do not train is the posterior muscle groups in our core. And that's why so many soldiers have shoulder injuries, they have knee injuries, they have lower back and hip injuries, because we have not trained our body through the life of being a soldier for the attributes necessary physically for us to do our jobs, our occupation as soldiers. And the third point I want you to take is this is going to drive the culture of fitness. The cornerstone of combat readiness is physical fitness, and you drive that cultural change through a test. And when you have a test that people must pass, they tend to want to train on that. And we want you to train on this test because this test trains on those 10 components of physical fitness, 6 primarily and 4 secondarily. Slide. Okay, so how did we get here? I talked about, we call it the BizPERS. It is the Baseline Soldier Physical Readiness Requirement Study. I won't go through the timeline, but it has been about 6 years that we have been studying and figuring this out to get to this point. And what I'd tell you is we took the 113 warrior task battle drills and common soldier tasks, and then we studied combat, 15, 16 years of combat, and said, what are the physical requirements that every soldier, no matter who they are, must be able to conduct in combat? We started with the warrior task battle drills, common soldier tasks, and we studied combat. Study, 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 regress, regress, and that got us down to the common task simulation test, which looked at the 11 most physically demanding, commonly occurring tasks, common tasks that soldiers must execute in combat. Things like running over, under, through obstacles, jumping over obstacles, dragging a casualty, doing a 3 to 5 second rush, man-to-man combat or contact, heavy lifting, things like that seem pretty obvious, but we broke it down to that 11. After those 11 were conducted, then the next phase, phase 4, you said, okay, now let's take those and let's find some physical fitness events that we can replicate at the scope and scale of the United States Army. We had to look at things from a common sense perspective, the number of graders, how much equipment are we going to be able to provide, how long is the test going to take for a 1.1 million person Army, and what is the efficacy of the test, how closely does it replicate what we need to do for combat with these 11 tasks, and how can we pick out of the 35 or 40 different events that were out there in industry and look at those and maybe combine and get after maximally these 10 components of fitness. And that's what was done. And what ended up was 3 battery tests. And from those 3 batteries, those were tested and we got down, combined, reduced, changed, looked at this different order and got us down to what is today the Army Combat Fitness Test. After piloting both Forces Command and Training and Doctrine Command, executed different pilots that went after the same components of fitness. We took the best of both breeds, combined those, and that got us into the Army Combat Fitness Test. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this, but it is, based on those 10 components of fitness, regressed from those 113 warrior task battle drills, combat, to the 11 that occur the most. That got us down to an 80% predictor of effectiveness to do your job as a common soldier in combat. Slide, please. All right, so for those who haven't seen it, I think we got about a 10-second pause here, but we're going to show you what the video, what the Army Combat Fitness Test looks like in a 3-minute video.
The Army is introducing a new physical fitness test. The current test, the Army Physical Fitness Test, has been the test of record since it was developed and implemented in 1980. It consists of 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, and a 2-mile run. The new test, the Army Combat Fitness Test, or ACFT, consists of 6 events that are based on tasks a soldier might encounter in training or combat. The ACFT tests all of the major muscle groups and provides an accurate assessment of a soldier's physical readiness for military duties. The events are completed in order and take 50 minutes or less for an individual soldier to complete. The uniform for the ACFT is the Army Physical Fitness uniform. The events are the 3-repetition maximum deadlift, the standing power throw, the hand release push-up, the sprint drag carry, the leg tuck, and the 2-mile run. The 3-repetition maximum deadlift is the first event. The event is a test of lower body muscular strength, coordination, and balance. Soldiers are required to lift the maximum weight possible, 3 times under control, replicating a litter carry or the movement of ammunition and supplies. The standing power throw is the second event. The event is a test of explosive power and coordination in the legs and arms. Soldiers are required to throw a 10-pound ball up and backwards over the head for maximum distance. The event replicates the movement required to assist a buddy over an obstacle or the power required to leap across a ditch. The hand release push-up is the third event. It tests endurance in the muscles of the shoulders, arms, and trunk. The number of successfully completed repetitions is counted over a 2-minute period. The event is similar to hand and arm movements required in combatives or repetitive loading of ammunition and supplies. The sprint drag carry is the fourth event. The event is timed and tests a soldier's movement skill under anaerobic conditions: sprinting, dragging, carrying, turning, and moving sideways. The event replicates moving a casualty to safety, moving supplies, or moving under fire. The leg tuck is the fifth event. It develops upper body, abdominal, and hip strength. From a straight arm hang, soldiers must raise their legs up so their knees or thighs touch their elbows. The number of successfully completed repetitions is counted over a 2-minute period. This event replicates climbing up and over walls, obstacles, or exiting disabled vehicles. The 2-mile run is the sixth event. The event tests aerobic capacity. This event replicates movements to and from contact. At the completion of the 2-mile run, the Army Combat Fitness Test is completed.
Okay, so as you can see, we took our least physically fit soldiers as the demonstrators for that video. But what I would tell you is all the photos you saw were photos from combat. The ones that the test is replicated after, and this shows in sequence what those 6 events look like, the components of fitness by the body, and then which component of fitness that each of the events corresponds to or tests. Next slide. Okay, so this is how long it takes, and as an individual, it's 51 to 54 minutes. I won't run through it, but it is timed after the standing deadlift. The 3-repetition maximum deadlift. We start the clock, and then you go through the rest period, and then the maximum amount of time that each of the events is supposed to take. About 51 to 54 minutes for an individual soldier. 16 lanes, which is the current fielding. How much the equipment is going to be fielded for at the battalion level. 16 lanes. You can test a company of about 120 to 130 folks, 2 repetitions of that 51 to 54 minutes or an hour. So in 2 hours, you can get a company, a normal-sized company in the United States Army through with 16 lanes of equipment. And what I'd like to talk about is the current PT test is a 40% predictor of combat, a 40% predictor of performing in combat, our current Army physical fitness test. This test is an 80% standard. Industry standard is about 70%, so we think we've met the marker on what is minimally necessary to actually train physically towards the occupation, and our occupation being soldiers and soldiers in combat. Slide. Okay, I'd like to highlight a couple of things on this slide. First off is the National Defense Authorization Act 2015 that says that, bottom line, occupational career field standards or evaluation will not be done on the basis of gender. This test is not just gender neutral, it is age neutral. It is neutral to size, it's neutral to how tall you are, how short you are, the color of your skin, what religion you are. Combat does not discriminate. It doesn't matter. The bullet coming at you does not matter. They don't care about anything except that you're a United States Army soldier. And that is why we are neutral in all aspects of this test. And the standards were based off minimally what every soldier must be able to do in combat. And that is the gold standard, which is the 60-point standard. And then based on the high physical demands study, we looked at we've graded this by moderate physical demand categories, the 140 MOSs in the United States Army, and then significant demands and heavy physical demands based on the Centers of Excellence and the studies that they have done on those occupational skills and what's necessary to do that specific occupation in combat. And that puts you in one of those three categories, and the standards that you must meet for that MOS, that skill, is either the gold or the gray or the black. Now, for the field test coming up, which just started actually in October for 60 battalions across the United States Army, we're going to look at individuals being tested by their military occupational skill, and an individual being gold, gray, or black. And then we're looking at some units. For instance, if you're in an infantry battalion, no matter what MOS you are, half of the units going through the field test, 30 of them, are going to be studied off of the ability for every soldier in that unit, no matter what their MOS is, to be able to execute the black standard because they're in an infantry battalion. And we're going to use the large-scale normative data off the 60 battalion field test to better understand what is in the realm of possible with respect to unit standards or individual standards. However, I just want to highlight gold, gray, and black, and that this is gender and age neutral. Next slide, please. We have the standard charts that are up, and I will tell you after this briefing, right around the corner to the right, all the Army Combat Fitness Test equipment is over here with our experts that can talk to you about it. And we also have the 0 to 100 standard across all 6 events are there for you to see. But I would highlight the gold, the gray, and the black. Now, I get a lot of questions about, well, wait a minute, you only have to do one. I only have to run at 21 minutes for the 2-mile run. And they think that's easy until you go through 5 events of pre-fatigue before you execute the 2-mile run. The current PT test is a 1-to-1 work-to-rest ratio. This test is about a 2.5 to 3-to-1 work-to-rest ratio. It will smoke you, and it will test all components of fitness. And so when you look at these standards, I will tell you, somebody that can score 60 points on all 6 of these, I bet you can probably score 300 on the current PT test pretty easily. So you don't look at it by points. You got to understand the fact that all components of fitness are being hit, and 60 points with this test is like 300 points for the current test. And you can't use points as a way to evaluate the current PT test versus this PT test. Slide, please. All right, this talks about the field test and the rollout. So from October 1st of this year till October of 2019, 60 battalions, I'm going to show them to you across the United States Army, representing every type of unit in the United States Army, are going to be conducting a field test they'll take 2 of these tests of those 60 units, and we're going to look at how do we administrate this. This gives us a chance to rewrite 12 major policies for the United States Army: reclassification, separations, evaluations, promotions, etc. A lot of policies are tied to the physical fitness test, have to be rewritten over this year. We'll be able to better understand the scoring standards, the initial scoring standards that we have put in, which are the initial operating capability standards, so that we can determine the FOC standards in 2019. And it allows us, quite frankly, to field the equipment to the entire United States Army, because on 1 October 19, this goes hot, this goes live. 1 October 2019, the entire United States Army will implement this test. And then from then until 2020, October of 2020, somewhere between there, and it is going to be event-based, not time-based. The chief and the secretary, sometime after 1 October 19, and it could be 2 October 19, say, bam, this is the test of record. It's going to happen somewhere in that 365-day period. The chief and the secretary have maintained their decision authority as to where they want to execute that based on how the field test goes, how the fielding of the equipment goes, and how leaders across the force move out and get after this test over the next year. Slide. And these are the units across the Army that are part of the field test. You can see every type of unit: large hospital, small hospital, reserves, guard, reconnaissance, logistics, combat arms, you name it, military academy, initial military training, every type of battalion, so we can get a good understanding of all of the types of soldiers in the Army that are going to take this test. There's even a 4-star headquarters that's going to execute this. TRADOC. All right, next slide. All right. So that's the Army Combat Fitness Test. So at this point, myself, if I'd like to take any questions anybody has on this, so we can turn the slides off, please. And then if you have any really hard questions, I will defer to Dr. East. That was supposed to be funny, but. Okay, yeah, go ahead, please. And we have one up here.
Hello, sir. Command Sergeant Major Har, Fort Devens Garrison, CSM. Could you talk a little bit about how this is going to get implemented logistically for Compost 2 and 3?
Yeah, so the bottom line is when you say how it's going to be executed logistically, you mean? Yeah, well, so staffing, so bottom line is master fitness trainers, that you have in your units. We're going to execute, we have mobile training teams going out right now. So how do you train individuals to be able to take this test? Let's take that on first. So we have mobile training teams that are already going out to train those 60 battalions across the Army. Once they're done with those 60 battalions, they're going to go out across the rest of the Army and train units on 3 levels. You're going to have the trainers, those that can train graders, and then those that can grade, 3 different levels. And then we're going to also have 2 resident courses at Fort Jackson and Fort Eustis that we're putting together in the next month that you can send your folks TDY to get trained. So that's training. Equipping. Equipping is a unit buy. It's a unit buy out of your O&M dollars. The Army is funding through through the POM, through to you, normal funding on all compos. You're buying this equipment yourself. Training and Doctrine Command and our units in IMT, we're already moving out and we're buying the equipment. So equipment-wise, buy it now. There's no reason not to wait. All of the equipment has been designated, contract has been let, so that, and the FRAGO from the Department of the Army that has that equipment, and it has the training manual and the test manual, have all been published in the Department of the Army FRAGO out to all the major commands in the Army. So if you have not seen it, reach up and ask for it. And the equipment lists are there, and you can go and buy that equipment now, whether you want to buy one piece of it, you want to buy a lot. But the contract vehicle's out, and so that's the way you equip it. So equipment, trainers, anything else, Sergeant Major? Yeah, okay. So let's separate out. So Army Combat Fitness Test doesn't have to do with registered dietitians, occupational physical therapists, strength and conditioning coaches. That is separately part of the holistic health and fitness system. That is going to take years, but the first tranche in FY19 is already starting, and the first people that are getting it are going to be maneuver battalions in the active Army, and then we're going to move on to Tier 1, Tier 2, and all compos. It's just going to take time because there's structure and there's trades that have to happen based on force structure, and the Army has to decide what's more important, what's less important, and how much do we need. And quite frankly, this pilot that FORCECOM is doing in 19 is going to tell us what we really need. You know, do we really need occupational therapists in every battalion, or should we have it at brigade? So that is being figured out in this pilot in 19. So come 20 is when I think you're going to start to see that slow trickle out that's going to go out. And we're looking at what is the mix of military versus civilians. Can we contract some of this out? All of that is going to be looked at as well. Because right now with the Defense Health Agency consolidation going on, we're trying to figure out medically how many of our registered dietitians, physical therapists, can we get out of the MTFs, get down into tactical units, and then how many civilians do we need to hire, or what do we need to contract for these facilities as we go down the road in the out years? Yep.
On the Soldier Performance Readiness Centers, where are they set up? How many people or units are they available to, and for how long will you be piloting that program?
Yeah, so, all right, so let me clarify this. So we are in the design phase. So this is years down the road. So what we're doing is, so bottom line is we have to have a design standard in military construction speak for the Corps of Engineers, and we're developing that design now. It's not going to make it in this year. And then next year, as part of the POM process, what will happen is commanders can look and say, you know what, I looked at this facility and we need to rehab it, and they can take pieces or parts of that design, or we can look at if the money's there and we have the ability to make these decisions in the out years. Again, this is, first you have to build the design. That what you saw was the objective, best case structure we would like to have. Every installation and commander, and then we have to look through the lens of resources available in the out years for how much of that we can buy and at which installation, et cetera. And that's going to take us years. That's a decade plus long problem set. But you have to start somewhere. And you have to start with a vision, and not just the vision, but also what are the capabilities that are necessary for us to train our soldiers across all components of fitness. Yeah, so the FORCECOM is piloting, not at the SRPC. So what they're piloting is the effectiveness of those professionals in the battalions and how they help with fitness, readiness, musculoskeletal injuries, all aspects of not just physical fitness, but diet, so nutrition, sleep. So again, occupational therapists, physical therapists, registered dietitians, strength and conditioning coaches, all the way down to the battalion level for 30 battalions to let us understand the effectiveness of having those professionals at the battalion level, and then we're going to measure that over the year, measure the effectiveness on readiness and injury rates for units, and the culture of fitness. And then we're going to use that to be able to make decisions, for the chief and the secretary to make decisions on structure in the force over the coming years, and which types of battalions and brigades get how many of those types of professionals based on the types of units that they are. Got a couple over here making you run around.
Do you have any plans to use wearable devices, sensors, as somebody goes through this program to track their performance and try to improve it in real time?
I'm going to start this. I'm going to hand it off to Dr. East. So in the macro sense, conceptually, what I would like to see, all right, in those soldier readiness performance centers, with those coaches, I would like to see electronic monitoring on those soldiers so we can monitor sleep and nutrition and their exercise. And so objectively, conceptually, yes. Have we started to pilot that yet? No. Will we? Yes. And we're looking at in the spring having an industry day for a lot of different things, that being one of them, on how we can look at piloting the effectiveness of things like electronic monitoring. Dr. East, any?
So it's important that we start where we can start, and where we're starting is relatively low tech. So eventually, once I guess the most important consideration is we're taking an industrial scale program that we've been executing for the last 100 years, and we're trying to individualize that program. To do that, eventually, we've got to use all available technology to include the wearable technology. But you can imagine a crawl, walk, run where a soldier comes in, they get an individual paperwork out that they record their scores on, and they turn that in at the end. So we'll start at that low-tech level, and then we'll progress up through the process.
Thank you. I am living proof that some people consistently make poor choices in diet. Is the Army considering restricting certain foods at DFACs and also getting rid of Taco Bells, pizzas on base?
I won't comment on your first part of your statement there. But no, so the answer to your question is yes. So the performance triad, we already have the Go for Green program in the dining facilities. So the food is already identified as being green, amber, or red, meaning really healthy, kind of healthy, not so healthy, and then not healthy at all. And we're trying to scale out as much of that unhealthy food as possible out of the dining facilities. Now, there is a slow roll in the Army, and I think all of DoD, to slowly get after healthy eating establishments on installations. But every base and every installation, every service is taking that on individually and with AFES and DECA, and there's a lot of other institutions involved with that. I would generally say yes. It's taking us time, and we're slowly getting there. So the answer to your question on both of those, frankly, is yes.
I would argue that if you go to the food court at Fort Bliss, you'll start to see that evolution away from pure, high fat, high caloric types of meals to meals that are much healthier in nature. So it's a great example of a kind of a planned community that's already made that first step.
Yeah, our dining facilities are already there. What we have to do is also look at the other side of things. Is when do you need more caloric intake? When do you need a fourth meal based on what you do and what your occupational skill is? And we actually have folks that are eating their own muscle because they're not getting enough caloric intake, and so we have to break into the institutional mindset of 3 squares a day is what you need. And we're doing that in initial military training, and we're trying to get that, for instance, the infantry one station unit training transformation that's happening, the 22 weeks, we're getting a fourth meal into them because they need it, because they need to build that muscle mass that they don't have. And so there's even the opposite problem on nutrition.
So one of the important things you're going to see in the new 7-22 is you're going to see an entire chapter on performance nutrition. So we're, in some respects, kind of going back to the future, back into the 60s and 70s where we started addressing nutrition and recovery in FM 21-20. It's coming back in full force as we publish the new doctrine.
All right, got time for a couple more questions, I think. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, General Frost, Susan Keating with AUSA. What kind of feedback are you getting from soldiers who have already taken the test?
Well, generally speaking, the feedback has actually been really good. Anybody who is, I will tell you, those that are kind of skeptical and ask a lot of questions, then healthy skepticism, understandable. Not sure about this, why that test? I think if you were to ask my boss, I'll even go out on a limb and say, if you ask my boss, General Townsend, was he a little bit skeptical about some of the events? Yep, he was. And then he took the test, and he was no longer a skeptic. He bought in all the way. And so when you take the test, you understand, because you know yourself, you know your weaknesses, and they get highlighted. And you get stressed in this test, and it's a good test of all components of fitness. So I would say, generally speaking, I have not, but then again, I don't know how many captains are going to say, hey, sir, your test sucks, to a general, right? But I guess my point is that the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. I'd let Dr. East ask the question. He was out there for every unit that piloted it and can probably tell you, what the feedback was better than me.
So I think there's a little skepticism among everyone. I think the way that we assuage that is through actually taking the test. So I try not to tell too many anecdotes, but I'm at Fort Bliss. We finish up testing the morning. We go to a DFAC. There's 2 PV2s sitting over there looking at me. And I thought, here we go. So they get up and walk over to me and they go, hey, sir, you did that test? And I thought, here we go. I said, yeah, what'd you think? It was awesome. It was great. So we do get mixed types of responses to it, but the younger soldiers seem to identify this. And as we recall, these soldiers are used to taking and training for the OPAT. So this is not a really big phase shift for these young soldiers.
So this is a great point I want to make. This test, if you're in the Army today, if you've been in the Army, for, let's just say over 10 years or maybe even 20 years, 15 years, this test, it ain't about today. It's not about you. This is about the future. This is about soldiers who are coming in the Army today that know nothing but this test and holistic health and fitness, so that 10 years, 20 years, that vision the Secretary talked about more ready, lethal soldiers in 2028 and 2038, they understand this, they've trained to this is all they know. It's not about breaking the paradigm shift in our minds for why this test is going to suck or be harder than the current PT test. It's not about what I think. It's about the future and getting over ourselves and our personal failings or weaknesses with fitness and learning to overcome them enough to pass this test. It's more important to train the soldiers in the future so that they are more fit and more ready than the soldiers that we have today. So that we don't have that 18% non-deployable. So that we don't have, spending millions, if not billions of dollars for musculoskeletal or medical problems because we are not doing fitness properly. Or for folks like me who had to have back surgery 2 years ago, lower back surgery, and has to have shoulder surgery next week. Why? A lot of it is due to the current way we do fitness. The current push-up is not good for your shoulders. The loads you have to carry take a toll on your lower back. It did on mine. Because why? I did not train my core well enough. And so this is about the future. And it's also those soldiers who have to take that occupational physical assessment test, which is 4 events that looks and smells and feels on the road towards this Army Combat Fitness test. Every soldier for the last almost 2 years, has had to take the OPAT. That's 1 repetition deadlift, a standing broad jump. It is a medicine ball throw from a wall, 4.4 pounds, and it's the shuttle run or beep test. That is a physical test to get in. That ramps you up towards holistic fitness for the Army Combat Fitness test. So there is a long-term plan from recruit to trainee to soldier to being a more ready Army that's involved with this process and those studies that you saw. Okay, everybody, thank you very much. I think we're out of time. I appreciate it. If you'd like to see us afterwards, the Army Combat Fitness test equipment is over here to my right and your left. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.